Minute. You're in possession. I ask you to move the adjournment.
I move the adjournment.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to Leaders' Questions. I wish to advise the House that 35 deputies have submitted matters under Standing Order 27A, which will be listed in the official debate. The matters raised by the following deputies have been selected for discussion. Deputy Joe Carey, the need to provide for Lower Ennis flood relief scheme in County Clare. Deputy Seamus Kirk, the changes required following the publication of the HICWA ambulance service review. Deputy Robert Dowds, the need for legal measures to tackle graffiti in the Greater Dublin area. And finally, Deputy Michael Lowry, the need for intervention to secure a replacement industry for the Lisheen mine site, County Tipperary.
Thank you very much. We now move on to Leaders' Questions, and I call on Deputy Michael McGrath on behalf of FINO.
Thank you very much, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, if the tragic death of Jonathan Corry is to mean anything, then it has to be a catalyst for change. Anyone who has seen the place where Jonathan tragically passed away cannot be untouched by it. One cannot be untouched by the sense of desolation, sense of loneliness, the coldness, the sadness that he must have experienced in the hours before he passed away on Sunday night or Monday morning. And if that doesn't make us angry, Taoiseach, and if that doesn't touch us in here, and if that doesn't make us determined as a people to address this issue, then absolutely nothing will. The measure of this government's response and the measure of our response as a people is not the holding of an emergency summit, welcome and all as that is, or a special Dail debate on homelessness. The measure of our response will be what changes. What will be done differently, Taoiseach, to prevent something like this happening ever again? And that's where the focus needs to be, because the alarm bells have been going off for quite some time on the issue of homelessness. In the last 2 years alone, the number of people sleeping rough in Dublin has doubled. This year, it has increased by about 30%. And it's not just a Dublin problem, Taoiseach. If you look at the annual report of the Cork Simon community, there has been a 4-fold increase in the last 3 years of the number of people homeless in Cork City. And not only is it an immediate issue of homelessness, but state policy is directly resulting in a pipeline of people who could well become homeless in the months ahead. Now, Taoiseach, homelessness is indeed a complex problem. It's not all about money. We accept that. But listening to Mike Allen of Focus Ireland on the radio this morning on Morning Ireland confirming that there are not enough emergency beds in Dublin tonight if every homeless person was willing to take one up. So the question is, Taoiseach, what are the short-term actions that your government is committed to taking to addressing the immediate crisis which is before us? And what are the longer-term steps that you intend to take to ensure that that pipeline of people who are on the ladder to becoming homeless will be cut off and stopped immediately?
Taoiseach, nobody can disagree with the sentiments expressed by Deputy McGrath. And I'm quite sure that nobody here in this House could actually describe the feelings of a person having to fend for themselves on the streets of this city or other cities around the country. How can you describe the feelings of Mr. Corry in the years, indeed, and the months and the weeks and the days before he passed away? And the same applies with the situation insofar as families find themselves in homeless positions, having to move to bed and breakfast or hotel rooms or on the streets. I think the situation that Deputy McGrath points out has certainly been brought to light by the death of Mr. Corry. But the categorisation of the different elements of this, from those who are homeless and rough sleepers, as against those who have become homeless because of rent increases are because of lack of space in terms of rooms and apartments and houses. The longer term solution is one that I outlined yesterday for your party leader. The government have reflected on this and made decisions about it for quite some time. Minister Kelly has pointed out the allocation of 2.2 billion for social and affordable housing, including direct provision by local authorities, by the voluntary housing agencies and so on, to deal with that out by 2020 and set out the timelines and the targets for places to be achieved. That's the longer term. In the shorter term, for quite some months now, Dublin City Council, as one council, have been working on bringing back into use over 1,000 rooms and facilities that are, as they call them, voided. And there are 265, I think, is the number that are currently being worked on now, with targets for others to be brought back into use. I outlined yesterday the number of emergency rooms that are going to be brought into use between here and Christmas, the dates and the numbers. And I'd point out again that in cases where there are individual circumstances that warrant an increase in the rent supplement, and that's actually available to the local authorities to deal with that. But the answer, both in the medium and longer term, is not a general increase in rent supplement. You have to deal with the question of supply, and that's why to take into account the processes for planning, for income stream for contractors, and for income stream for those who are going to buy affordable housing, you need to be able to increase the supply drastically. And that's why government have made its decisions and allocated money in that regard. So I think I agree with you. An emergency debate doesn't answer this question, nor do meetings of committees. But they are part of a process of making decisions that actually put those things into effect. And in this day and age, as I said yesterday, the vast majority of people who sleep rough in this city and other cities should not have to do so. Deputy McGrath will be aware that some of those cases are very complex, and the circumstances that apply in each individual case are all different. And as you know, Mr. Corrie, who died, was offered accommodation on many occasions, but as was his right, he chose not to accept that.
Thank you. Deputy McGrath.
Yeah, thanks, Ciarán Comhairle. Taoiseach, I don't get a sense from your response that you really grasp the seriousness of this crisis, that you grasp how urgent it is and what it means for people who are in this situation. The reality is, Taoiseach, that the profile of people who are becoming homeless in this country or who are about to become homeless in this country is not like what it was before. It's not all about drug and alcohol addiction. That, of course, is a factor in many cases, but certainly not in all. The reality is that the rental sector in this country is completely dysfunctional, and it is in crisis. And the policy of your government in not allowing the rent supplement caps to be increased is directly resulting in a lot of families today not being able to rent privately. There is no council house for them, and they are in emergency accommodation. And many of them are effectively homeless. And that is what is happening, Taoiseach. And none of us know what is going on in the mind of somebody who is homeless. But I listen to those who are at the coalface, those who are representing people who are homeless, who are dealing with them day in, day out. And they are saying, Taoiseach, that this is a national crisis. And one step that the government could take, which you have dismissed, is the issue of the rent supplement caps, which would allow many people who are locked out of the private rental accommodation market from accessing a home. And you have refused to do that. Can you please explain why?
Well, sorry, allowed. Thanks, Deputy McGrath. The rent supplement obviously plays an important part in the provision of accommodation supply. There are 71,800 persons in receipt of the supplement, of which 19,000 of those were awarded this year, representing over 26% of the total recipients. At the end of November 2014, there were approximately 29,000 rent recipients were on the live register, representing 8.2% of the total live register. And the government committed funding of 344 million to the rent supplement scheme in 2014. But it's not true to say that either money nor action has been taken here. The current rent limits came into force on the 17th of June 2013 and introduced some increases in Dublin and Galway, with Dublin limits increased by a weighted average, I think, of about 9%. The current review of the scheme is practically finalised. But you know this, Deputy McGrath, you know the answer to the question. If you increase rent supplement across the board, the only beneficiary of that are the landlords. And if you do it without increase, if you do it without increasing the supply of houses, then it's meaningless. The local authorities have the right to increase rent supplement in individual circumstances where they think that that's appropriate. But if you
we're over time now. Please,
I pointed out to you, Deputy McGrath, I pointed out the numbers who are in receipt of rent supplement this year and the fact that 344 million has been allocated for this. If you increase the rent supplement generally across the board without increasing the supply of houses, you do not deal with the fundamental issue, which is supply. And that's why 2.2 billion has been allocated by the government over the next number of years to deal with this. Now, let me quote for you.
Taoiseach, we're way over time here. Sorry.
30 seconds, I can't quote it.
No, there's a time limit on
To get a job, you need a base, and you need a good 3 square meal a day. As well, to be honest, and you need some good sleep, and you won't get it on the street, so you just can't grab a job on the street when you're in a sleeping bag. Those words are the words of Jonathan Corry 2 months ago. Now, I'm glad to see that the figures for unemployed have dropped to 10.7% today, still too high. But in these kind of cases, you will never deal with the situation until you have a proper supply of accommodation for people. Now, the emergency ones, the voided ones, the empty ones are all being looked at now. I hope that the meeting tomorrow will bring about some focus from all of the agencies who are working in this area.
Deputy MacDonald. Thank you.
Thank you, Count Corla. Taoiseach, on November the 12th last, I raised with you allegations made by a whistleblower from within the ranks of the senior civil service. The whistleblower in question was the authorised officer appointed to examine a scheme of tax evasion through Ansbacher accounts. The whistleblower has come forward with allegations of tax evasion by senior political figures and obstruction in the investigation and exposure of these wrongdoings. The whistleblower says that his investigation into Ansbacher accounts, offshore accounts and tax evasion was terminated by then Minister Mary Harney in 2004, once Mr Desmond O'Malley was discovered to be one of the holders of these accounts.
You can't be making allegations like that, please. You cannot make allegations of that nature in the chamber.
The whistleblower further alleges that other senior figures from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael also held these very secret Ansbacher accounts that were administered by the late Des Traynor and a Mr Padraig Collery, formerly of Guinness and Mahon. The whistleblower reports, as I have said, absolute obstruction to his efforts to complete his investigation. He further reports that agencies of the state have failed to investigate all of these matters thoroughly, including tribunals of inquiry. Now, on the 12th of November, Taoiseach, you directed me to the Public Accounts Committee. You said that that was the proper place to have these matters investigated. The Public Accounts Committee has been advised last night that we will not be permitted to investigate these matters, neither issues around alleged tax evasion, nor indeed allegations of political obstruction or even indeed corruption.
Question, please.
So can I ask you now, Taoiseach, what next? Can the serving civil servant complete his investigation? I know that he has made that request of Minister Richard Bruton. Will he permit that? Will you permit that? What of any Garda investigation? I know that Minister Bruton very belatedly passed on a witness statement to the Garda Bureau for Fraud investigation. Will you be in contact with the Commissioner to ask about progress in that case and any possible arrests or prosecutions? You sent me in the direction of the Public Accounts Committee, Taoiseach. These very, very serious matters will not be heard or investigated there. So what do you propose as an alternative action?
Well, the Public Accounts Committee did receive legal advice from the Oireachtas that you mentioned yesterday evening. I think the position has already been outlined by the Minister for Jobs and Enterprise in pointing out that all of the issues that were raised by the whistleblower, which by the way came about as a welcome change and reform here by the government in terms of allowing for protection of witnesses' disclosures in matters like this. And obviously the delay was pointed out by the Minister, who has since sent on the documentation that is required and was requested by the Garda Fraud Investigation Unit. Now, it's not for me to contact the Commissioner of the Gardaí about the documentation received by the Fraud Investigation Committee. They know exactly what their powers are, and obviously will act upon the witness statement sent to them. The question of the charges that you make against certain people are not for me to answer here. There's a process that is now under train, that is now in train, that was availed of under the legislation by the whistleblower, and the documentation required and requested by the Fraud Investigation Committee in the Gardaí has been forwarded to them by the Minister, and obviously they will make their decisions and follow through on that. The Public Accounts Committee, of which you remember, did receive its own legal advice from the Oireachtas yesterday in respect of their powers.
Deputy MacDonald?
Well, Taoiseach, it's not a case of me making allegations against anyone, and I emphasise these are allegations, but they come from a very credible source. And the whistleblower alleges Des O'Malley, Ray McSharry, Gerard Collins, Maura Gagan Quinn, and S. Barrett, Richie Ryan, a former Minister for Finance, and others.
Sorry.
And
Are you making these allegations here in the chamber?
Pardon me?
Did you make allegations here in the chamber regarding?
I am echoing the allegations that are very serious that have been brought forward by the whistleblower. That is the allegation, Count Corley.
No, that you know quite clearly, if you bother to check the records and take advice from the clerk at the door, you cannot name names of people who are defenceless to contradict you.
Well, Count Corley.
So there's a long-established principle in this chamber. I know you're new in the Dail, but I'd ask you to brief yourself clearly on what you can and cannot do in a democratically elected chamber.
The difficulty, Taoiseach, is this.
And I wish to state quite categorically, in case anybody is under any doubts when you say S. Barrett, it doesn't apply to me.
Thank you, Count Corley. Taoiseach, the difficulty is this. The whistleblower alleges matters of serious concern associated with very senior public figures, some of whom are still in receipt of state payments by way of pension as we speak. The whistleblower has told us very clearly that he has gone to every length to have these matters explored and investigated. And the whistleblower now fears that will never happen.
Put your question,
now,
please. Thank you.
My question is this. Given the serious nature of these allegations against named persons, and perhaps the more serious allegation that there was a connivance to avoid or even to cover up the exposure of these matters, and given the fact that the Public Accounts Committee is not permitted to investigate these matters, what, Taoiseach, do you propose to do? Because they are very serious allegations. So, will Richard Bruton allow the person in question to complete their investigation?
Thank you.
That's one option. Or will you, as Taoiseach, and will the government, given the seriousness of these allegations, propose another mechanism for the full examination of these issues, for the full examination of agencies of the state who...
You're over time, Deputy. Would you please adhere to the chair? Thank you.
These matters fully and thoroughly.
Taoiseach.
The law was introduced here for whistleblowers to bring forward certain matters of information that they feel are relevant and important in the public interest. And the law is framed to protect the whistleblower, and that's an important reform, and that's a central element of the law, and that must be maintained. The whistleblower must be protected. Now, the Fraud Squad Investigation Unit made a formal request for a witness statement to be forwarded to them by the Minister for Jobs and Enterprise. The Deputy is well aware of the reasons why that was delayed. Minister Bruton pointed out why that was delayed. Minister Bruton confirmed that the witness statement, as requested, has been forwarded to the Fraud Squad Investigation Bureau. That's an arm of the state with particular and specific responsibilities and powers. And I would expect that the Fraud Investigation Unit will follow through and act upon the witness statement that has been forwarded to them. Clearly, the advice given to the Public Accounts Committee is that this is outside their remit, and that's formal legal advice, I'm sure, to them. I haven't seen that advice, I read it. You're a member of that committee yourself. So the opportunity now exists in the process of the law here for the Fraud Investigation Unit to act upon the witness statement forwarded by the whistleblower, sent through the Minister for Jobs and Enterprise to them for their examination. This is not some kind of opportunity to send it away on a journey from where it will never come back. This is a formal request from the Fraud Investigation Unit that has been now acted upon. The witness has forwarded his statement, and that's been sent to them.
Thank you.
And confirmed that. In fact, I know that the whistleblower had that confirmed to him last week by the Minister. So I expect the Fraud Unit to investigate.
Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan, thank you.
Taoiseach, your government is dealing with a number of legacy issues that were neglected by previous governments, and progress is being made, which makes it all the more vital to get it right. And the concern and the issue I want to address this morning are those for the ladies who suffered that most appalling procedure of symphysiotomy. Now, many of us have met those ladies. We listened to their stories. We had a debate here, and some of them were in the gallery listening. And I want to acknowledge the work of Deputy Caoimhín O'Caolan, who chairs the Oireachtas group. Now, they had so many expectations and they had so many hopes that the payment scheme would see justice for them. But most regrettably, that's not their view of the scheme that has emerged. And they've identified very serious shortcomings and defects in the scheme. And most serious of those defects is the fact that the scheme is not in keeping with the concluding observations and recommendations of the United Nations Human Rights Committee. For example, there are very oppressive timeframes. There's a deadline of 20 days to apply from the 10th of November. In exceptional circumstances, which will be decided by the assessor, there can be a further 20 days, which is very different from the scheme for hepatitis C survivors and residential institution survivors. There's no right of appeal to the courts when the assessor decides a sum. The levels of payment are falling far short than what has been awarded in the few decided cases through the courts, and there's no reference to a thorough and independent investigation of the practice of symphysiotomy. Now, all of us here who listened, we know about the inhumane, cruel, degrading treatment that these ladies suffered, and made all the worse, I think, by the fact that it was a treatment that was needless, it was a treatment that they knew nothing about, and it was a treatment that they had no hand actor part in the whole procedure. And that pain didn't finish with the procedure. That pain continued and continues today for those ladies. So back to my point that it's vital that we get the scheme right for them in the interest of justice. So my question is, I mean, how can you say that these ladies are receiving justice when 99% of the survivors are objecting to this scheme? And will you support their call that the scheme is withdrawn and that it's going to be replaced by one that meets the United Nations Human Rights Committee recommendation?
Thank you.
Well, this is an issue of great personal concern to those women who had to go through this particular procedure, and you're right. And I know that Deputy O'Caolan, as one deputy, was a member who raised this on many occasions here in the past. The options here were pretty stark. Every individual would have the opportunity to go to court and have an adversarial conflict there with an outcome that couldn't determine obviously in advance. But to avoid that, the Minister appointed a Justice of the Court to look at what the options in terms of a scheme might be. And she made very particular recommendations for an order of payments, 50,000, 100,000, 150,000, without the necessity of having to go to court, but leaving open the option that if that were the choice of any particular woman involved, that they could still have that open to them. And that wasn't a figure, Deputy, that was determined by the Minister. It was a figure that was brought forward by the Justice in her fine report. And the intention was that here is an option for women who went through this particular procedure to apply and to have prompt payment made to them of an order determined and outlined by the Justice in her report. And that does not take away from their right, if they don't want to accept the symphysiotomy scheme, to have a court case at the end of the day. I know that there are a number of groups involved here, and one particular group does not accept the terms of the scheme. Others do, but it's a choice that was followed through and set out by principle of the Minister, saying we should have a scheme here because this matter is sensitive and personal and has to be dealt with. And Justice set out a scheme with payments that in a non-adversarial way that would deliver those promptly to women. It's their right individually to accept or reject. We had the same, Deputy O'Sullivan, as you recall, with the Magdalene scheme, where there were lots of legal advice that people should take a different route and end up in adversarial positions with women in particular who had gone through very difficult circumstances. I think that scheme, again determined by a Justice, worked out well, and payments have been followed through there with other facilities as well. So the scheme was determined and set out by the Justice in her report with the level of payments to be made promptly, but keeping the right of any individual woman to say, I don't accept that,
Thank you.
I want to take my case to court.
Thank you. I mean, I'd have to make the point that it's 99% of the known survivors who do not accept that this scheme is meeting their need for justice. And just on that aspect there, I mean, there's no reference to the perpetrators of this most cruel treatment. And because if a survivor, as you said, accepts the payment, they have to irrevocably waive all their rights and entitlements and, quote, indemnify and hold harmless the people responsible for imposing this suffering on them. So I don't know how we could expect survivors to be willing to accept that. And it's going against what the United Nations Human Rights Committee have advocated. And I'll just read what the chair said of that committee. He said, I simply don't understand how the state can look the other way at what seems to have been systematic assault on people who weren't in a position to resist or even give consent in many cases. We called for prosecutions explicitly, and I have to hope that the recommendations won't be ignored. These ladies are not getting justice. And it seems to be that the state is implicit in allowing those individuals, those groups and those institutions who were involved in this treatment to just escape any sense of justice. I don't know what you think about restorative justice, Taoiseach. I think it's a very powerful tool. And these ladies are being denied restorative justice, and if they take the payment, they are being denied the opportunity of going to court also. I think they're being put in a very, very difficult situation, and it's not justice for them. So the question is, could there be, at the very least, the withdrawal of the waiver, because there is an understanding that it is unlawful, and that there would be a 3-year period of entry for people who want to make a claim?
Well, as I said, you quoted there from your letter, Deputy O'Sullivan, the state is not looking the other way. Actually, the state, in response to claims that were raised in the House here by many deputies, have responded by asking a Justice of the Court to look at the nature and the scale of what was involved here, and to set out a scheme that would allow for prompt payment depending on the nature and scale of the procedure that women had to go through, and set those out while keeping their rights and entitlements to every individual to have their case taken to court. Justice in this country is determined by courts. On some occasions, I met with Louise O'Keefe recently, who had her case in the High Court, in the Supreme Court, and who eventually, after 16 years, had a determination made by the European Court. So the rights and entitlements of any of the women who went through the symphysiotomy procedure are not infringed by the scheme set out by the Justice.
Thank you.
And it's their opportunity, their right and their option to apply and have a prompt payment made to them on the scale of the procedure that they went through. I don't know what would be served by the extension of the waiver for 3 years, because they don't lose their right to take their case to court if they wish. And they know of the scheme, they have voted on it in some cases. 2 groups accept it and a majority of the other one doesn't, and that's their right. But the scale of payments are there, and they do not lose their rights or entitlements to have their case taken to court if they wish. So I hope that they make a determination personally as to whether to apply under the scheme or take a longer, more adversarial route to a court.
Thank you. That completes leaders' questions for today. We now move on to the order of business. Excuse me.
The order of business shall be as follows. Number 20A, motion regarding leave to introduce supplementary estimates votes 12, 17, 25, 26, 30, 31, 32, 35, 36 and 40. Number 20B, motion regarding referral of supplementary estimates votes 12, 17, 25, 26, 30, 31, 32, 35, 36 and 40 to the select committee or subcommittee. Number 37, Social Welfare Bill 2014, report in final stages resumed. Number 38, statements opposing domestic violence. Number 9, Customs Bill 2014, order for second stage and second stage. It is proposed, notwithstanding anything standing orders at 1, in the event a division is in progress at the time fixed for taking private members' business, the Dáil shall sit later than 9 p.m. tonight in private members' business, which shall be number 176. A motion regarding the funding of health services resumed shall, if not previously concluded, be brought to a conclusion after 90 minutes. Number 2, number 20A shall be decided without debate and subject to the agreement of number 20A, number 20B, which is the referral to the subcommittees, shall be decided without debate and any divisions demanded thereon shall be taken forthwith. Number 3, the following arrangements shall apply in relation to number 38. 1, the statement of a Minister or Minister of State and of the main spokespersons for Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin and the technical group who shall be called upon in that order shall not exceed 15 minutes in each case, and such members may share their time. 2, the statement of each other member called upon shall not exceed 10 minutes in each case, and such members may share their time. 3, a Minister or Minister of State shall be called upon to make a statement in reply which shall not exceed 5 minutes. Number 4, there will be no topical issues tomorrow. Tomorrow's business after oral questions shall be number 9A, Water Services Bill 2014, order for second stage and second stage. And it is proposed that not with anything in standing orders, in the event of a division being claimed on the conclusion of second stage of the Water Services Bill 2014, that division shall be postponed until after the order of business on Tuesday, the 9th of December 2014 in Cancorla.
Thank you. There are 5 proposals to be put to the House. Number 1 is the proposal for dealing with delayed sitting of breaches. Is that agreed? Agreed. Number 2 is the proposal for dealing with item numbers 28 and 20B, motion relief to introduce and referral of supplementary estimates without debate. Agreed to? Is that agreed? Agreed. Number 3 is the proposal for dealing with item number 38, statements opposing domestic violence. Agreed to? Is that agreed? Agreed. Number 4 is the proposal that there will be no topical issues tomorrow. Agreed to. Is that agreed? Not agreed. Not agreed.
Cancorla, we think that there should be topical issues tomorrow. It's a normal sitting day, and we don't see any good reason to deny deputies the opportunity to raise urgent matters of the day as normal.
Taoiseach. Taoiseach.
The House is...
Sorry? Sorry, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to object to number 4 as well.
Okay.
The reason that there's no topical issues tomorrow, it would seem to me, is to lash through the water bill over Thursday and Friday with no vote until Tuesday, to allow the government sides to be away from the debate on Friday, down the country or whatever, and not to take part in it, just like you did with the first round of the water bill. It's extremely important, there's topical issues. For example, yesterday the topical issue, the key one, was homelessness, and no doubt there'll be other ones tomorrow.
Thank you.
I think that there should be a resumption of topical issues and stop lashing through the water bill. If it needs to be extended next week, it should be extended.
Thank you.
Corla, I think it's absolutely hypocritical of the Deputy Leader of the Sinn Féin party to come in here and demand time for topical issues on an issue that is so important to everybody in respect to the Water Services Bill. When you came in here just a couple of weeks ago and held up this place for 5 hours and didn't allow topical issues to be taken at all, didn't allow them to be taken at all. Now we're allowing House sitting until 8 o'clock tomorrow and 8 o'clock on Friday to give everybody an opportunity to have their say on the second stage of the Water Services Bill. You've been demanding this and you're going to get the time that you need. But for you to come in and say we should have topical issues tomorrow, you sat over there for 5 hours, held up the work of this House, held up the work, and didn't allow the topical issues to take place at all.
No, thank you.
Either you're suffering from amnesia, or you're very selective in your points.
I'm now putting in the question. The question is that there will be no topical issues tomorrow be agreed to. Question is carried. The fifth issue is the proposal for dealing with item number 9A, Water Services Bill 2014, tomorrow agreed. Is that agreed? Agreed. And the order of business, Deputy Mihal, or sorry,
Yeah.
Deputy.
Thanks very much, Count Corla. Taoiseach, can I...
All right.
Can I ask you about a couple of pieces of legislation, please, Taoiseach? One is the Gambling Control Bill, which is a very important piece of legislation to deal with the regulation of gambling, and I suppose to deal in particular with the issue of problem gambling, which, as you know, is becoming a growing phenomenon. Deals with the protection of vulnerable people and many other important issues. When will that be brought forward into this House for full debate? The second issue, Taoiseach, I want to raise is many people who are customers of financial service providers are being denied access to the Financial Services Ombudsman because of a 6-year rule. Now, one opportunity to address that issue is through the merger of Pensions Ombudsman and Financial Services Ombudsman Bill. If you can tell the House when that piece of legislation is expected to be brought forward.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Yeah, in the second case there, Deputy McGrath, there's a steering group of people central to this who have commenced their work on looking at this. It'll be next year before it's published, and I can't actually put a time scale on it for you. In regard to the gambling bill, that's due for about the middle of next year. It's quite a complex thing, and it's an issue, as you have rightly pointed out, is of serious concern in many cases.
Deputy MacDonald.
Margaret Count Corla. Taoiseach, can I ask you when we might expect to see the terms of reference for the Commission of Investigation into the mother and baby homes and other institutions?
Sorry, there's a phone there. Would you switch it off, please?
As I say, the terms of reference for that. Can you tell us when it might come before the Dáil? Whether we'll have the opportunity to amend those terms of reference and whether they'll be seen by survivors and advocacy groups. Just to say also, Taoiseach, you're probably aware that there's very big concern amongst the survivors of the West Bank orphanage and some of the other Protestant institutions, that they will be excluded from the terms of reference. So I want to bring that to your attention. And can I also ask you on an associated issue about the progress of the Adoption, Tracing and Information Bill? I understand it's due for publication sometime in 2015. But I think it is a very urgent piece of legislation. I understand that it's complex. I do appreciate that. But could you just indicate it when give a more concrete indication of when we might see it? Yeah,
that's due for next year. You're right. It is very complicated. In respect to the mother and baby homes and the West Bank orphanage, the Minister has obviously almost completed the work here in respect to the terms of reference. They will have to be, approved by the House here, so there'll be an opportunity for debate for everybody. I know that he's conscious of the West Bank orphanage, but I can't give you the detail of the stage he's at with this, but I'll have him advise Deputy MacDonald on the progress made there. So he'll also be in a position to indicate when he expects to bring the terms of reference through government for debate here.
Deputy O'D.
Taoiseach, there's a commitment in the programme for government that during the course of its lifetime, this government will substantially reduce poverty. Now, in view of the fact that 1 in 5 children under the age of 17 are living in poverty, below the poverty line in this country, 1 in 6 adults are living below the poverty line, and 130,000 extra children have fallen below the poverty line in the last 4 years, according to the recent UNICEF report. Do you think that objective will be realised by the end of the life?
That's not the order of business. I thought you were looking for a debate or something. Sorry, that's not the order of business. Deputy Healy-Rae. No. You didn't ask. You're asking an opinion. You don't have opinions on the order of business. You can ask a question about a report and when it's going to be taken, but you can't express an opinion on policy. You know that as well as I do. You're around for a long time.
Commitment in the programme for government. I can ask you about that, can I not?
Yeah, well, of course you can.
Yeah, well, that's what I've asked, though, and that's what I can answer.
That's a different issue. What about the commitment of the programme for government?
The way out of poverty, as you know, in the programme for government is to create jobs. And you'll be glad to know that the unemployment rate has dropped to 10.7 today, down 2 percentage points. 80,000 jobs have been created in the last period. And the challenge is, Deputy OD, and I agree with you, to have the benefits of a rising economy and rising confidence in consumer sentiment spread throughout the country. And that's why USC was reduced at the lower levels. 83,000 were taken out of the requirement to pay income tax. And the efforts of government will be to spread that to the most vulnerable, and that includes the children and the families that you mentioned, of course.
Deputy Healy-Rae.
Thank you very much, Town Caller. Taoiseach, you will be aware of the very serious concerns with regard to the price of milk next year. Farmers are in shock at what is being proposed, a 50% reduction in their incomes. I'm asking this under the European Stability Mechanism Amendment Bill, and will the government ensure that the new Commissioner will work in trying to ensure that milk prices will be...
You'll have to do that separately now by way of a topical issue or something, but...
Back in last October, the Minister's meeting with the milk sector today. Obviously, there are global implications here because of the scale of productivity internationally with big producers. Ireland's been constrained for many years, as you know, because of quotas, and that's why it's important that we keep the issue of the capacity in Ireland here for the future as an issue. The Minister's meeting with the sector today, Deputy, to see what might be done here.
Thank you. Deputy Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. Taoiseach, I have parents in my constituency expressing concern about their children, whether they get a place in a local school, a place near their home. The education admission to school bill is to make administration process more inclusive and equitable, and to ensure that the way schools decide on applications is structured, fair and transparent. The framework also proposes a mechanism to ensure that every child receives a school place. Taoiseach, welcome to the publication bill.
Yeah, this is a great deal of work has been done on this, Deputy Fitzpatrick, and some extra submissions have been received from external sources, but it's still expected that it will be published in this session.
Deputy Grealish.
Before the end of the year.
Deputy Grealish. Regarding proposed legislation, I welcome the announcement last week of the government's social housing strategy to tackle the housing shortage prevalent across the country. with specific reference to the Landlord and Tenants Bill, given that most of the current legislation in this area is outdated and needs to be updated and reformed to give greater stability to tenants and protection of landlord. When does the Taoiseach expect this bill to come before the House?
That'll be next year, in the middle of next year, Deputy Grealish.
Thank you. Deputy McGrath.
For my go to Count Cola, I have two pieces of legislation that I want to ask about, and I wonder if the Minister, he replied, was meeting the farmers today. Would the Taoiseach or somebody meet the road hauliers tonight under the road transport bill? You know, they're in Dublin to see them in lobby.
You don't need to meet them
because the road tax, especially, it's a simple issue to be sorted out, to have some bit of fair play and survival of small businesses in rural Ireland. And Dara Clown, Taoiseach, I want to raise with you a matter of profound concern relating to the failure of some state-funded organisations for caring for children. And we saw something in Barrick, you were shocked. I'm talking about the Children and Family Relationships Bill, because this is a care home in Kildare that's not acting properly in the care of a young child, a teenager, and I think it's going to hit the headlines again, and you'll be shocked or profoundly shocked when you hear it. It's time to deal with it now. Before it's been raised in the Senate by Senator Mary Ann O'Brien as well. It's a very concerning issue. And there's huge funding, over 860 million go to this organisation, and they're not, in my opinion, caring for people properly.
Well, you actually opposed the children's referendum, if I recall correctly. You were quite vociferous on it. So the
when is the bill?
Well, you were always good at attracting notice anyway. That bill is due for publication in this session.
This session.
Everything with you is a simple issue. The Minister for Transport. The Minister for Transport already met the hauliers and the Hauliers Association about a range of issues that they raised with him. He already met with them personally himself. So obviously lobbying continues.
Thank you. Deputy Flanagan.
Thanks, Concordia. Just two questions on bills for the Taoiseach. In the programme for government, it talks about digitalising the census, the 1926 census. That legislation would be enacted for that to happen, because there's great interest in that particular area. Is there any update on that, Taoiseach? And secondly, just to ask in relation to a bill that was passed by both houses over 500 days ago, actually, the Construction Contracts Bill, which deals with prompt payments for contractors and subcontractors. Just Taoiseach, what is the delay there, and when will that bill actually be commenced?
That bill is now the responsibility of Minister of State Nash, who's dealing with it. The Construction Contracts Bill was a case of lots of questions and issues before it went through here. I don't have a publication. I don't have a date for publication for you, Deputy Flanagan, in respect of the census of 1926. There were a number of issues about that were under consideration. I'll come back to you on it.
Deputy Bannon.
Thanks, Cian Corla. Our objective when coming into government was to radically overhaul our health system, and we are making real progress on changing the health system despite less money and fewer staff. When can we expect to see the health reform bill coming before the House to put in place the new structure for the health service?
Thank you.
That's a major bill, Deputy Bannon, and it's been restructured for some time, so I can't give you an accurate date, but it'll be next year.
Thank you. Deputy Deering.
Thank you, Concordia. Taoiseach, you may be aware there's an increase in robberies in rural Ireland in recent times, and I suppose one of the good things that Deputy McGrath across the way instigated here earlier in the year was the scrap metal bill. He had produced a private members bill during the year, which started a debate on the cash for gold outlets and so on and so forth. There was a commitment made at that stage that there would be the development of the draft heads of the precious metal and cash dealers bill at some stage during the year. Taoiseach, what stage is that at the moment, or when can we see the publication of it?
That was a bill brought forward by Deputy McGrath. It was a simple issue. You did well. I'll have to come back to you, Deputy Deering, with a date for publication of that. Thank you for raising the matter.
Deputy O'Craylon.
Taoiseach, yesterday the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Health and Children met with the National Paediatric Hospital Development Board in the course of a visit to the St James's Hospital site. I note from the promised legislation that there is a National Paediatric Hospital Development Board amendment bill scheduled. I'd like to ask the purpose of the amendment bill and when you expect that it will publish. Thank you.
That's going to be next year, Deputy O'Connell, and I don't have a date for publication of it. I'll send you a report on what the detail of the bill is likely to contain.
Thank you. Deputy Ross.
Thanks, Sean Keola.
Councillor, before the summer recess, I introduced a bill to amend the powers and the remit of the Public Accounts Committee. And in view of the fact that has become a matter of great controversy, and indeed we are getting legal advice which is unwelcome and in conflict with other legal advice, I would ask the Taoiseach if he could reassure us that he will give time for that bill, so that those on the PAC who are worried about the fact that our powers are being curtailed by political direction are not true.
Do I understand, Deputy Ross, that's the private member's bill you're talking about? Has it been sort of drawn through the lottery for discussion here yet?
It hopes that it will be discussed here, okay. But in the absence of it being drawn in the lottery, and it is unlikely to be so, as you acknowledge, would the Taoiseach give time for it?
Well, I'll consider that. Obviously, I'd like to think that the reform introduced, that people can bring forward private members' bills like this, is a welcome reform. And I can't predict the outcome of the lottery, but I'll give consideration to the Deputy's request. Obviously, as you'll agree, I think you'll agree, Deputy Ross, that whatever government has been in office, the Public Accounts Committee has been a very special committee of the Oireachtas for very many years, and has operated independently of any direction from government. And we'd like to see its independence and powers obviously retained, and that it can do the job that it's supposed to do.
We are getting conflicting legal advice, which is confusing our remit enormously, and it would be helpful if the Taoiseach gave it time. I'll withdraw it from the lottery if the Taoiseach would give it time. Would that be fair? I'll withdraw it from the lottery if the Taoiseach will give it time. Is that?
Listen, sure, life is a lottery, isn't it? I mean, sorry, Deputy. It's quite likely to be drawn. I think that the Ross bill is something that people would like to see debated here. I've no doubt.
Could I just put on the record? Sorry, Deputy Ross, would you mind resuming your seat, please? Thank you. Deputy Ross.
There is a queue there, as you're aware, and even you can't jump that queue. So.
Would you please resume your seat? I would just put on the record that if PAC wishes to investigate matters, it is open to make a proposal to CPP for changes to the orders of reference. Now, that was done with the Dirt report. So if there's a particular issue that needs to be considered, you can make a proposal to CPP. Sorry, just a second, hold on. Sorry, resume your seat for a moment, please, would you? I'm just making the point that if the standing orders or the terms of reference of a committee are restrictive, if in exceptional circumstances they wish to seek a change, they can make an application to the CPP. Deputy Durkin, thank you.
Thank you. The control and sale of alcohol is promised legislation. Can I ask to what extent it is being progressed, and whether or not we're likely to see it in an early date?
That's due next year, Deputy Durkin.
Early next year would be the
end of spring, I would say.
Thank you.
That concludes the order of business for today. The Dáil stands adjourned for 1 hour. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Just before I do that, there's two motion relief to introduce supplementary estimates. Votes 12, 17, 25, 26, 30, 31, 32, 35, 36, and 40. Could I call on a minister?
I'll move those motions, you can call it.
Please to move. Is the motion agreed? And the second motion is motion referral of supplementary estimates votes 12, 17, 25, 26, 30, 31, 32, 35, 36 and 40 to the SEC subcommittee, select committee or subcommittee. Could I again ask the Taoiseach to move?
I so move, I can't call it.
Is the motion agreed? Agreed. All stands adjourned for 1 hour.